So again, today we celebrate the greatest event in human history. And I love saying that because really the resurrection is the greatest event in human history. In fact, it has altered history in such a way that is more far-reaching than any other event. It's in such an emphatic way that it's really altered the course of history. That the resurrection, whether people believe it or not, it truly has had an impact on our world. And so the last couple weeks here at Junction Community Church, we've been confronting crossroads. We've been talking about this theme of crossroads and confronting crossroads and how to navigate and deal with crossroads and walk through those challenging times. And so we've been talking about that, and it's truly been an encouraging moment. And not only have we realized this challenge of crossroads, but last week I love that we discovered the crossroads of Christ as He was at the Garden of Gethsemane, because at the Garden it truly was one of the most epic crossroads moments in human history. It was the time where Jesus was very distressed and He comes to a place of prayer. He comes to a place where in that transition of the crossroads, He knew that He had needed to come to the Father in prayer. It was a powerful explanation or learning experience for us to dig in and see how Jesus confronted crossroads. And so if you missed last week, you can always catch up by watching online. You can jump on the website. You can also navigate there on the Junction Community Church app, and you can watch last week's message and pick up on that. But it was truly powerful. And what we discovered ultimately was that when we're confronted, not if, but when we're confronted with major crossroads in our lives, we must go to God in prayer. We must walk through those crossroads moments in prayer, because ultimately we'll be able to navigate forward as we surrender our lives to God, as we surrender our wills over to the Lord and let Him truly lead us forward. And so our takeaway from last week was simply this: prayer puts us on God's path. And so in the idea of crossroads, in the theme of crossroads, we can go to the left or we can go to the right. We are always given a choice. But as we go to prayer, we don't have to be confused about that choice. We can walk through and patiently pursue God and get His direction and His guidance in our lives. And He'll lead us in those crossroads moments of our lives. So prayer is the key. Prayer puts us on God's path. Now today, I want to examine the resurrection and significance of the crossroads it represents. Because not only do we see a crossroads in the garden, and it's been a long time since I've watched The Passion of the Christ, but I started watching The Passion of the Christ yesterday, and it starts off in this moment of prayer where Jesus is in the garden. And man, that movie's intense. If you've never seen it, it's intense. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. It's just right out the gates, He's in this conversation with God in prayer, and it's just absolutely intense. But the bottom line is He knew that prayer was important, and He knew that at that crossroads He needed to connect to God in prayer. But the crossroads that I speak of today is that of the resurrection. And the resurrection has absolutely transformed our lives as we know it, our world as we know it. And ultimately for us, as we come to the resurrection, it's a crossroads of sorts. And we need to discover for ourselves what direction we're going to take. Because after all, the resurrection really is the distinguishing factor of Christianity. It's what makes Christianity different than every other religion out there. It's what separates Christianity from every other belief system or religion. It's the single moment that everything sounds good, beliefs and faith up until that moment. But when we get to the resurrection, Christianity is set apart. When we see this idea of Jesus resurrecting from the dead and really offering you and I life, it is the distinguishing factor of Christianity. In fact, it's that moment that as we look to it, it really is the crossroads of what I would call dead religion and a living relationship with Jesus Christ. It's at that moment that we just go from these religious traditions to something far different than that. They're not just religious traditions or beliefs or thoughts that we've carried on from one generation to the next, but it's at this moment of the resurrection that we move beyond religious rituals and we get to a place of really discovering a personal relationship with Christ. And so it's a powerful moment. Now the implication for us this morning is we no longer have to live under an oppressive view of God. I don't know about you, but For my life and my upbringing, I didn't grow up in church. I was not very religious. Like, we connected to church, but it was not like very often, and we just didn't. And that's just the way I grew up. And there it was kind of the furthest thing from my mind. I always kind of thought there must be a God out there. There might be a God out there. I don't know. Maybe there is no God out there. I always kind of just wrestled with that growing up and really not being in church. But here's what I did have a view of God. My view of God was that if there was even a God, if there was a God out there, He was this mean guy. And He was kind of up there, and anytime you did something bad, you better watch your back, because he got a belt, and that belt reaches all the way from heaven down to earth, and He will smack you, right? And and maybe you grew up in a different generation like I did, where when you got in trouble in school, they actually spanked you. Yeah. Nowadays, you're like, what? Like, my mom and dad don't even spank me. I'll call the cops on them. Don't come to my house. No, just kidding. But when we grew up, and there was always, the feared paddle, man. Some of y'all know that. You experienced the paddle, and especially the one with, like, drilled holes in it, so there was less resistance from the wind, and it just kind of, bang, you felt it. But sometimes they used to have old school rulers, a yardstick, basically. And that yardstick, somehow it can reach from the back of class to the front of class to anywhere. And if your hands were anywhere on the table, man, your teacher just whack, let you know. I don't know how I got off on that completely, but here's how I got off on that, is because that's how we viewed God. Like, He's, the fifth grade teacher that's about to smack your knuckles when you do something wrong. He's the big guy upstairs, and He's got this whip that reaches all the way down. But I'll just tell you what, that's pre-resurrection. That's this oppressive view of God. But at the resurrection, everything changes. And all of a sudden we move from this oppressive view to God to this view of God where He actually came to humanity and lived among us and became one of us, and then died to offer you and I eternal life, and resurrected to prove that He defeated death itself. And because of that, we have a living hope. Because of that, everything changes. We no longer have to live under the weight of sin and shame and guilt. We can experience true freedom from sin and the joy of salvation. How many of you are grateful for the crossroads of the resurrection? You see, it's at that crossroads that everything changes. And so I want to look at a story from the book of Matthew, and it's an account where Matthew, as he writes of the resurrection, it gives us this picture of what happened at the later part of the resurrection. And I want to read into that and just pull some truths for us this morning, because I think that it will really speak to us about the power of this crossroads, and how not only it's just some story out there, but how it impacts each and every one of us individually and can totally and absolutely transform our lives. So Matthew chapter 27, verse 62 is where we're going to start. You can turn there if you have a Bible, or you can navigate there on your smartphone, or you can look up on the screens, and we can start off there. So Matthew chapter 27 and verse 62. It starts off and it says, the next day, the Sabbath, the leading priests and Pharisees went to see Pilate. Now this is after you see that Jesus has been crucified, He's been put to death, and He's now been put in the tomb. And so the next day on the Sabbath, which would be Saturday, the next day on the Sabbath, the leading priests and Pharisees went to see Pilate. They told him, "Sir, we remember what that deceiver once said while he was still alive. After 3 days, I will rise from the dead." And so the religious leaders of the day, they came together and they came to the governor, Pilate, and they said, "Look, Pilate, I know we crucified this guy, but that's not good enough. We need to go, and we need to go back to the tomb where he's laid, and we need to make sure that he doesn't get out." Because the reality is we heard him one time. And what he said was that he was going to resurrect on the third day. And let me just say, if God said He's going to do something, He's going to do it. And so, anyhow, here it is. And the religious leaders of his time, which were enemies of Jesus, and they wanted Jesus not only to die, but to make sure that He didn't come back from the dead. They come to the governor, they come to Pilate, and they're like, "Hey, remember what he said. Remember what this deceiver said." They didn't like Jesus. And remember what he said, that after 3 days, I will rise from the dead. So they come up with a plan. Let's read on, verse 64. It says, so we request that you seal the tomb until the third day. This will prevent his disciples from coming and stealing his body and then telling everyone he was raised from the dead. If that happens, we'll be worse off than we were at first. And so they come up with this plan and they say, here's what we got to do. We got to get the biggest, baddest dudes in the guard. And we need to get those guys to stand in front of the tomb and not only seal it, but guard it and create a roadblock. We need to block Jesus from getting out of that tomb. We need to make sure that this doesn't happen. Because they know that if it happens, they're going to be worse off than they were. I mean, they thought they got rid of Jesus when they killed him on the cross and when they put him in the tomb. But now, like, if he were to, magically resurrect, and then what would happen? This would be horrible. And so they come up with this plan. And they say, look, we're going to stop. And so the enemies of his day, not only the enemies that were physical enemies, but the spiritual enemies as well, they thought they had defeated him. And they thought they had put him to death. But little did they know that Jesus would conquer death itself. Little did they know that Jesus was going into a tomb, but he wasn't going to stay there. And no matter the roadblock that they put in front of him, no matter the roadblock, no matter the guard, no matter the people they've put in front of that tomb, there was nothing nor anyone that was going to stop the resurrection from happening. There was no demon in hell. There was no guard in the Roman army. There was not a single soul that was going to be able to stop what God was about to do. How many of you are grateful for that? The resurrection was coming. And so, here they are. And as I see this unfold, I really see this unfold in our own lives, because I believe we all have an enemy of our souls. We all have an enemy of our souls, and he wants to set up roadblocks in our lives, and he wants to stop us from the journey that we're on, from our path in life and in faith, and he'll stop nothing short to be able to put up and set up those roadblocks. And you've experienced it. You've seen this in your life. You've faced certain roadblocks in your life, and you've encountered them, and you've wondered why, and you've had all kinds of questions about that. In fact, we're going to be starting a brand new series next week, 10 o'clock, called Questions. And so we're going to be confronting the biggest questions of life. You don't want to miss out on that. I would encourage you to be here. Again, next week we get back to one service, 10 o'clock, and we're going to start a brand new series called The Questions. I'm truly excited for that. Anyhow, getting back to today, we've been in those moments where we faced roadblocks. And at the crossroads of the resurrection, the enemy tried to impose a roadblock, but there was, again, nothing that was going to stop God from doing what he was about to do. And in our journey, our enemy is there at every turn to discourage us and defeat us. He'll attack us by any means possible. He'll put roadblocks in our lives in every area. And in fact, he'll do it in the area of faith. I think that's one of the first areas he wants to attack. Because after all, if he can stop us from having faith, he can stop us from most anything else in life. And a lot of people, they struggle with faith, and that's okay. Like, I'm there. Like, if you're here today and you're like, I'm struggling, well, I struggle sometimes too. And if you're saying, well, I don't have it all figured out, that's okay. Because I think that's one of the biggest roadblocks that God puts in front of us when it comes to faith, is that if you don't understand the entire Bible, if you don't have it all figured out, if you can't make sense of everything when it comes to spiritual things, then maybe this thing isn't real. And he'll set up those doubts and discouragements about faith. And if you don't have it all figured out right now, then maybe you're never going to figure it out. And I would say that that's a huge roadblock, because for me, I just want to take one step at a time. I don't have to have it all figured out. In fact, when I went to Bible college soon after I was saved, I didn't grow up in church, and so when I went to Bible college, I didn't know the Bible at all. I didn't know the stories of the Bible. Everybody around me in Bible college, they all know who Moses and Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and when they said Noah, I'm thinking about my uncle Noah. I'm like, hey Theo, what's up? You in the Bible, homeboy? That's what I was thinking about. Like, I didn't Noah who? Like, Noah what? Noah? Like, it's like, I didn't know. I didn't know any of that. In fact, I remember when I was first saved and I went to church, and I was so caught off guard because my pastor said something about the Apostle Paul, and I was like, all I heard was my name, and I'm like, is he wanting me to say something? I didn't say nothing. He's like, the Apostle Paul said, or whatever, as he's preaching. And I'm like, I didn't know. That wasn't me. And, And I had no idea about the Bible. But here's the thing. We don't have to have it all figured out when we start. And that's kind of how life is anyway. But the enemy, again, will set roadblocks to our faith journey. If you don't follow this path, if you don't have it all figured out, and he'll use those things. And so he'll use, again, faith roadblocks. He'll use relational roadblocks. Some of us in our lives, we experience relational roadblocks. And many of us, it's in our romantic relationships, in our marriages, and whether we're engaged or whatever it might be, we face these roadblocks. And many a times, those roadblocks will be the very thing that will deter us, that will distract us. And not just for all the wrong reasons, but, he'll try to create divides. And sometimes it's with our children. You know how I know that's true? Because some of you had a healthy talk with your kids this morning on the way to church, or at least getting ready for church. I don't want to wear that. Well, that's what you're going to wear. I don't want to go to church. Well, you're going to go to church. Like, none of y'all here this morning, right? None of us had those kinds of conversations this morning. But, man, roadblocks, Well, fine, if you're going to be like that, then I'm not going to go to church. I laugh because here's the real story, okay? We're getting ready for church, right? And the girls, the two older girls, they're ready. And I'm leaving earlier. So they said, can we go with you? I'm like, sure, yeah, come along. And Selah's ready, but, Mom wants her to stay back so she can keep her with her, keep her under wraps, And so Selah can't come. So what does Selah say? I don't want to go to church then. What'd you say to your mama? But she's easily provoked, not easily provoked. She's easily consoled, and so, you just, here, have some candy, and, we're going to have lots of fun at church. And so, anyhow, but, that's the thing. The enemy will set roadblocks spiritually. The enemy will set roadblocks relationally. He will set roadblocks in every area of our lives. Emotionally, he will set roadblocks. And we know this is true. Like, he comes and he attacks us, and we deal with fears, and we deal with doubts, and we deal with all kinds of emotions. And for some of us, our emotions come out as like, crying. Others, our emotions are like, what you crying about? And I'm crying because you shut it, and it's like emotions, what I'm saying? They're all over the board. One's crying, the other one's yelling. But the reality is that those things too can become roadblocks, and there's so many things. Fear is one of the biggest things that the enemy will use to set up a roadblock in our lives. Like, I've seen it time and time again. And fear is just one of those things that the enemy will use. He'll use it in every area of life, in every place of life, and we need to be mindful of that. Physically, our health, he'll attack us. Like when we're going through some physical challenges or sicknesses or ailments or diseases, and as we go through that, man, it's a roadblock. Because all we want to do is get better. All we want to do is get healthier. All we want to do is get whole, and yet there's that roadblock, and it's stopping us from living to our fullest potential. It's stopping us physically from being all that we want to be or that we can be. And so again, a roadblock. Ultimately, he'll use every area. In fact, the last one that we think about often is he'll use a financial setback to set up a roadblock in your life. And we've all been there. We've all been there. Where we've sat in front of a financial setback and we just feel like I can't go on, I can't keep going. One of the biggest roadblocks, I'll give you one that's a spiritual and a financial thing, is the lie that says, people, the church just wants your money. I'm like, not really at all. So here's the thing. We say this every Sunday. Like, if you're here and you're a guest, feel no obligation to give. But how many of you heard that? Like, I don't go to church because they just want your money. And have you seen what the pastor drives? I'm like, yeah, you seen what I drive? Like it's real, like high class stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like way over a decade old, but it drives, man. It's awesome. So anyhow, the bottom line is this: is that there are so many roadblocks. And the enemy would not only try to set roadblocks against the resurrection, let me stand in front of the tomb and let me guard it. But here's the reality: the enemy would try to stand in front of your life. The enemy would try to stand in front of who you are and what you're going through and set up a roadblock. But guess what? There's a resurrection coming. And so, despite of the roadblocks, it's at the resurrection we discover the dawn of a new day. Not only is it a new day, it's a fresh start. It's a new beginning. Your past is not too bad. Amen, right? Your past is not too bad. Your current reality is not too dark. Ultimately, the sun is rising on a new day filled with hope and freedom and life. And so let's continue to read on here. So we request that you, let me go back to that. So we request that you seal the tomb until the third day. This will prevent his disciples from coming and stealing his body and then telling everyone he was raised from the dead. If this happens again, we'll be worse off than we were at first. And so it goes on to read and say, Pilate replied, take guards and secure it the best you can. So they sealed the tomb and posted guards to protect it. They tried to stop what God was about to do, but it wouldn't work. So we move on to chapter 28, verse 1. And it says this, early on Sunday morning, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb early on Sunday morning, as a new day was dawning. And that's the beauty of the resurrection, is that no matter what we've been through in our lives, no matter what yesterday looks like, there's a new day dawning. And I'll tell you, this morning, even as I was preparing, I usually get up very early on Sunday mornings, and I get my day going, of course, not without coffee. Thank you, Jesus. So I got my coffee going, I got my day going, and it's usually dark by the time I'm up in the morning, on Sunday mornings especially. And so I'm sitting with the lamp on in the office, and I'm preparing for the message, and I'm going over my thoughts and all of those things, and I began to open the blinds. And as I do, it's still dark out, but I could see the sun starting to, come up over the mesa. And it's getting lighter and lighter, and all of a sudden, as it's getting lighter and lighter, it starts to turn blue and orange. And then I just said, thank you, God, that you're a Broncos fan. Super Bowl champs. Yes, Lord. Hallelujah. We got into the presence of God there for a moment, but back to spiritual things. So anyhow, I saw it, and it was beautiful, man. It was beautiful, orange and blue, man. It was beautiful. So there it was, but then it starts to change, and if you've ever seen a sunrise, there's such beautiful moments, and don't want to get distracted too much with sunrises, but here, they're beautiful. They're great moments, right? It starts to come up, and, I still have the lamp on because it's not quite light enough. It's starting to get light, but then it goes from the blue and orange to kind of just, the clouds turn white, and it starts to get really light out. And then all of a sudden, what begins to happen is that sun just creeps right over my neighbor's house, right over the mesa. And as it peaks, it's just the top of the sun. Boom! It was like, just slapped me in the face. It was like so bright. In fact, I wanted to turn it down now because it just totally just overwhelmed me with light. And I think that that's kind of the way it is when it comes to the resurrection. Is that there may be some roadblocks in front of us. There may be some things that are trying to hold us back and stop us. But ultimately, when we see the power of the resurrection, it's like the sun coming up. And I dare you to look at that thing in the face. You ain't going to do it. Because the reality is it's powerful. And that's what the resurrection is like. That's not only what the resurrection of Christ was like and what it accomplished, but in our lives today, we can see the resurrection as that absolute new beginning that brings about new light and a new start and a fresh start, a new beginning to our lives. And that's what I envisioned this morning as that sun came up. It was so bright that I, again, had to, turn the blinds down and finish up what I was doing. But ultimately, that's what it's like. It's the dawn of a new day. And so, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb. We read on. It says, suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, rolled aside the stone, and sat on it. His face shone like lightning, and his clothing was like white snow. And so here's the reality. It's not only is it a dawning of a new day, but it's kind of like an earthquake. And the reality is what happened here is there was this earthquake experience. And the tomb shook, and of course there was the resurrection, and this angel comes, and there's two responses. When there's an earthquake, we can do one of two things. We can either be afraid, or we can be set free. Like, two things are happening here. And our enemies, I'll tell you what, though they try to stand in front of us, and though the enemy of our soul tries to stand in front of us and set up roadblocks, I'm telling you, when the earthquake's coming, all of those roadblocks are going to be shaken and kicked to the side. Because remember, greater is He that lives on the inside of us than he that's in this world. Our enemy is not strong enough. Our God is way bigger than we can ever imagine. And so when those roadblocks are there, we can see them. And as the earthquake begins to unfold and shake, all of those roadblocks are set aside. It says here in verse 4, it says, the guards shook with fear when they saw him and they fell into a dead faint. Here's the reality. Life is going to shake you at times, right? It's going to shake you up. It's going to shake up your faith. It's going to shake up your relationships. It's going to shake up your financial stability. It's going to shake up all kind of areas of your life. And the reality is when the earthquakes came, you can either be like these guys who they fainted under the pressure, or you can be like the others who realize that even in the face of an earthquake, greater is He. Even in the face of this challenge that's coming against me, I can believe that the resurrection could be the very turning point of my life that changes everything. And so, when there's an earthquake coming, we have to realize that God could ultimately move in us and through us, despite of what's in front of us. Though our enemy may be defeated because of the earthquake, for us, it reminds us that he's a defeated foe. For us, it reminds us that he's already been defeated, and it puts him in his rightful place where he belongs, defeated. And it also puts us in our rightful place where we belong, children of the Most High God. How many of you are grateful that you're a child of God this morning, that He loves us and has a plan for us? And so the story goes on. It says, then the angel spoke to the women. Don't be afraid, he said. I know who you are looking. I know you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He isn't here. He isn't here. He's resurrected. At the crossroads of the resurrection, everything changes. Everything changes. And He's no longer here. He's no longer held down by death. In fact, He's defeated death. He isn't here. We read on. He is risen from the dead just as He said He would happen. Come, see where His body was lying. And don't you love that about God? Is that whatever He said He would do, He's going to do. When He said He's going to do something in your life, when He's given you a promise in your life, and when He's set something up for you, He's going to accomplish it. Here's the challenge. It's not always in our timing. Because we want it now, right? Let's be honest. Like, I want it now. Like, it's almost noon here. And usually, on a regular Sunday morning, like, we're done. We're, like, out of here already. Because we start at 11, and so, like, we're already gone. And, like, now, like, my body's telling me it's time to eat. Like, y'all are feeling it too, right? You're like, oh, man, this is like, I'm getting hungry. And then he mentioned food. Let us pray. Lord. So, He said it would happen. But our timing, again, we want it right now. We want it yesterday. We don't want to have to wait. But I've heard this statement, and it's this, that most overnight successes are 20 years in the making. And so what I know about that statement is it's really a business statement, but it's a life principle, is that we're not going to get where we want to be overnight in any area of our lives. It's not going to just happen like that. It's going to look like it was overnight for some people, but I'll tell you what, it doesn't come that way. Like, I look at my life, next year, I will have been serving God and when I first left the Bible college, for 20 years. Like, what? How did that happen? I left home when I was 17. How did that happen? And so, I'm looking at other areas of my life, and I'll tell you what, how many of you love your spouse this morning? Y'all didn't have any conversations, like on the way here or last night or anything like that, or your significant other, whatever it might be. But here's the thing. My wife and I will be celebrating 15 years of marriage this year. And I'm excited about that. I'm like, yeah, come July, 15 years, that's a great, to which some of y'all are like, oh, that's cute, 15 years. Sister Joseph, our brother Mario, for them, they were in the earlier service, and they're getting ready next month to celebrate 50 years. So, like, they're like, oh, 15 years, that's cute, But for me, I'm thinking like 15 years, that's amazing. That's longer than my parents were married for, I'm saying? Like, they didn't make it that long. And I can say this, that our marriage today, 15 years later, is greater than it's ever been. Like, it's amazing. And for some of you that are newlyweds, you're like, no, it can't even be possible. And you've been married like 2-3 months, like, just give it about 7 months and we'll see how you feel. Because then you go through that period of like, God, just take them. I hate this person. Like, why did you put me with them, God? And He's like, I didn't. You chose them. Like, it's up to you. It's like your thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to get all mad at God. He didn't do it. Like, but it gets better. Trust me. And the point is this, is that like, it happens over time. It's something that over time we see the success of life. So coming back to this, He's risen from the dead just as He said He would. Again, His timing is not going to be overnight, but as we pursue God in every area, we'll see in His timing He makes all things perfect. Verse 7, and now go quickly and tell His disciples that He has risen from the dead and He is going ahead of you to Galilee. Now go ahead. And if we read on in the last portion of these verses that we're going to read today, it says, you will see Him there. Remember what I have told you. And so the women ran quickly from the tomb. They were very frightened, but also filled with great joy. And they rushed to give the disciples the angel's message. Here's the reality. We experience both joy and fear kind of in the same sense. You know how I know this? Because, like, have you ever jumped off of a bridge and lived... No, really. Have you ever jumped off of a bridge? Like when I was growing up, it was 7 Mile Plaza, you know what I'm saying? Like we would go down there and this is the bridge, you know, and like who knows what's under that water? Nobody does. But like every, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid that like has it all figured out, they're going to jump off that bridge anyway. They don't care. And you get in that water, and like, you kind of get sucked in a little bit, and you're like, Jesus, and you don't even believe in Jesus, and then you finally make it through, and you're like, I got this, But, it's that feeling of like, you're kind of afraid, right? But then there's that adrenaline. You jump off, and it's like, yeah, this is awesome. It feels the same. And here they are. They're frightened, but they have this joy and their expectation. And I want to, in our lives, when we're confronted with roadblocks, when we're confronted with fears, when we're confronted with things in our life, we need to get to that point that no matter what's in front of us, we have the joy that will overcome it. No matter what comes against my life, I will have the joy that will sustain me and carry me forward. Recently we had a conversation in my small group about that, about how, basically, what would happen if you lost all your stuff, your house, I'm like, you know what? It don't matter. Because when Mary and I got married, I literally had nothing. We walked into our house with each other, and it was all good, baby. That's all we needed. We didn't have furniture. We didn't have anything. Literally, we had an air mattress, and it was the kind of air mattress that you had to blow up both sides. You know what I'm saying? You had to air up both sides. And one side was broken and the other one wasn't. So, we both were good at night. We woke up in the morning and one of us was on the floor. That's how it was. We didn't have a dining room table. Our first, dining room table was the boxes that our pans came in for our wedding. And we were happy, it was beautiful. So take it all away. I don't care. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of salvation will sustain me no matter what comes against my life. No matter what comes, the joy of salvation will sustain me. And so here they are. They go in joy. And they rush to give the disciples the angel's message. Last couple verses. It says, and now as they went, Jesus met them and greeted them. Let me just say, in your journey in life, as you're going through the crossroads in life, as you're dealing with the busyness of life, don't miss when Jesus comes to interrupt your life. Don't miss when imagine that the disciples running and they're going to go tell, or these women and they're running and they're going to go tell the disciples. And Jesus comes and He meets them on the path and they're like, oh yeah, sorry Jesus, but we're going to go tell the disciples that anyway. Could you imagine? And yet I think that's what we do. We get so busy in life. We get so caught up in life with our goals and our careers. And those things are good things, don't get me wrong. But we get so caught up with all that we miss Jesus when He's trying to speak to us. And if we would stop long enough, just like last week's message, to pray and to get His direction, He'll give us the success we're looking for. He'll give us the direction that we need in life. But ultimately, He stops them. He meets them. He greets them. And they ran to Him, grasped His feet, and worshiped Him. And then Jesus said to them, don't be afraid. Go tell my brothers to leave for Galilee, and they will see me there. And so as we begin to wrap up today, we don't need to be afraid. God is with us. God is for us. And no matter what is in front of us, no matter what roadblocks the enemy has tried to set up in front of us, we can be assured today that God will get us through. And so what I love about the resurrection is that it offers every one of us a fresh start and a new beginning. No matter where you are or where you have been, the resurrection offers us hope this morning. It's a crossroads moment. A crossroads moment that will allow, but here's the question, will we allow the resurrection to change us? Will we allow the resurrection to interrupt our journey and truly impact our lives? Or will we simply allow it to be a story that inspires us little more than the latest movie we've watched? Oh, that was a cute story on Easter Sunday morning. Everybody looked so good, and they were dressed in nice colors and smiles, and it was sweet. Or will we allow the resurrection to truly change our lives? It's a crossroads moment. It's up to us ultimately. What will we allow it to do? And so for me, the resurrection is the focal point of my life. Before I understood the power of the resurrection, I was dead in a life lived far from God. I knew nothing of a relationship with Christ. The religion I knew was dead to me because it was built on rituals rather than a relationship with Christ. That's the only kind of religion I knew. It was dead. It had no meaning. It had no purpose in my life because it was void of relationship. It was void of authenticity. So I'm not sure where you are today. Do you believe? Are you unsure? Maybe you're a skeptic this morning. Or maybe you too have been radically transformed by the resurrection. So whatever the case, we all find ourselves at a crossroads when it comes to the resurrection. Will we believe? Will we allow the power of the resurrection to transform us from the inside out on a daily basis? Or will we ignore it? Will we ignore the new beginning that it offers? Will we ignore the life of freedom that we encounter at the resurrection? It's up to us. It's our choice. We're at a crossroads. And so as a takeaway today, may we never forget, it's at the crossroads of the resurrection that we experience a new beginning. See, so many times we're looking for a second chance, a new start, a new beginning, something fresh, something new in our lives. And it's knocking on our door today in the form of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. How will we respond? And so would you close your eyes for a moment and ask everyone in this place today, at the crossroads of the resurrection, will we choose life or will we choose death? It's our choice. So for everyone online and for everyone in this place today, with eyes closed just for a second, God stands before you and He wants you to choose life. That life is found in salvation. It's a gift that He offers. It's a free gift. And all we have to do is, we don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to have all the answers. We just need to take that initial step. And if you're here today and you say, I want to take that step, I want to commit my life to Christ. Or for some of you, you say, I want to recommit my life to Christ. If that's you, right where you're at, would you just lift your hand and then put it right back down? God sees your hand. Somebody else in this place today, you say, that's me. I want to commit my life, or I want to recommit my life to Christ. Would you just raise your hand and then put it right back down? God sees your hand. If you're joining us online, please let us know. We want to connect with you. And right there where you're at, maybe you're watching, maybe you're in your room, maybe you're around your kitchen table and you're watching this on an iPad, but I want you to know right there, right now, God is speaking to you. And you know what? Just raise your hand right now, right where you're at, and say, today's my day. I'm going to allow the resurrection to change my life. We believe that God can do that right where you're at. And so for everyone that raised your hand, and for all of us here today, would you repeat a simple prayer after me? Would you just say, Jesus, today, I commit my life to you. From this day forward, let the resurrection change me, transform me. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Can we just put our hands together and thank God for all of those that are responding?